Hello and welcome to this month's drawing tutorial. This month we're going to shake it up a little bit, and I'm going to be drawing on pastel paper with charcoal and graphite pencils. This is the picture that I'm going to be drawing from, but I'm not going to focus on making it a really tight, exact rendering like we did last month. Instead, I'm going to loosen it up a little bit and show you how to do some things like make leaf effects in graphite without taking a million years. So to begin with, get a piece of willow charcoal, and I'm just going to do my rough right on the paper that I'm going to do the finished drawing on. The main elements that I want to get in the drawing are the horizon line. Make sure that's not in the center. And then the focal point here, the center of the path, the line of the trees, and the shape of the clumps of shadows. So I'm still going to pay attention to those large shapes, and I want to have a good idea of where everything goes before I start drawing, even when I'm doing a really loose rendering. So there's a difference between loose and sloppy. You never want your work to be sloppy. Now, in order to get that tunnel effect from the leaves, I'm going to need to pay attention to the shapes of the light. So these marks might not make a lot of sense to you yet, but they're what I see when I squint at the picture and focus on the large shapes of light and dark. That shadow pattern falling on the road is really important too. Compositionally, it's the thing that draws the eye down away from the stark contrast in the leaves and trunk. So if it weren't for the shadow shape, there'd be nothing to bring us down to the lower half of the picture plane, and that would all be wasted space. So now, what's the next step? I'm going to use a piece of charcoal pencil and do a more careful rendering of the trunks. And I'm sizing these trunks in terms of each other. So this second trunk needs to be fatter than the first one, and the bottom lines up with about the bottom third of this tree. Then I'm looking for the shape of the dark on the tree, and I'm just going to scribble that in. Scribble, scribble, scribble. Let me push that a little bit farther and get all the trunks to that level, then I'll come back to you and show you what to do next. And when you've pushed up this far, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can add a little bit more shading to the shadow shapes, like the lighter ones that are being cast on the road. I think I'll do that just really quickly. Just scribbling a little bit there. And again, you're looking for the shapes of the shadows, so squint at your reference material if you have trouble seeing them, and try to get the relative light and darkness of those shapes correct, even at this stage. I'm going to scribble my way over here. Now for the foreground, I can use a charcoal stick and just quickly add in a little bit more, a lot faster. I can also use the stick to darken up some of the darkest patches of foliage very quickly as well. When I shade foliage with pencil, I use a scribbly motion that's kind of circular and back and forth all together, instead of just going back and forth, which will make it look too linear. Good. And then, to blend, I can go to a stomp or tortillon, that's rolled up cone of paper, and use small circle strokes like this, which will fill in that tooth and smooth out the tone, so it won't look so bumpy anymore. You'll also develop some midtones. See already here, this dark black has been softened out into a midtone on some of the trunk. I'm going to leave some of the texture as well. For the larger areas, you can go to a larger stomp or a tortillon or a piece of felt or a Kleenex or your finger. Many different things will work. So now this second part is just smoothing out some of those tones a little bit more. I'm still concentrating on the shadow shapes as I soften and blend my first pass of shading together. So let me finish that much off camera and I'll come back to you. Now I've smoothed out those darks just a little bit and you can see how it's coming along. At this point it's good to step back, squint at the picture, and see how your relative contrasts are shaping up. The important point is that they strengthen the composition. So this foreground is a lot darker in my picture than it is in the reference material. I have to make the decision now if that is something that I want or something that I don't want to keep. If I want to lighten it up, all I need to do is take a chamois cloth and rub some of that away. See, voila, like so. And then with that chamois I can also go in and add some light tone to areas that need to be darkened up just a little bit. You can either stipple with your finger like this, boom boom boom, or you can wipe. Very nice, very nice. Let's go and do some work in the leaves though. The leaves are fairly light, so I can put them in either by scribbling. I'm going to use a 2H pencil and show you how that could work. If I just want kind of a vague pattern of the leaves, I'll kind of scribble in some interesting looking lines like this. Notice I am not at all trying to abide by the picture itself. I'm just trying to get the feel of leaves. The easiest way to do that in drawing is by scribbling like this. Scribble, 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 scribble. And then when I get to an area of contrast at the bottom of the pattern, I take a little bit more time and I go about it more carefully, and that will help the eye to see all of these other forms as leaves. So the idea is that you have a small piece here and there of high detail, and the eye will fill in the detail for you in the rest of the places that is appropriate. Another way that you can draw leaves in graphite or charcoal is by using a technique from pastel work. Now in this technique you use your razor blade, look for an area of interesting pattern in the leaves, scrape off some sediment, so some little pieces of graphite or charcoal right on the paper, and then smash them flat with a very clean palette knife. Smash. And I can do a little rub back and forth. Then you go back in with a pencil and just emphasize those patterns to make them a little bit more leaf friendly. If you know what I mean. So you go back, emphasize things that happened kind of accidentally, and you make them look more intentional. And that's just a process of taking some time, picking out a few areas, and really going in and making those leaves come to life. But you have to continually step back as you work and make sure that you're not getting those leaves too dark. Now the other thing that you need to do is to make these fence lines a little bit more intentional looking by darkening them up. So then use a small stomp and press down on the line to fill in that tone and make it darker still. So that is going to take a while. I'm going to go off camera, push those leaves up a little bit, work on the fence line a little bit, and then come back to you again and show you how it's going. Now I've bumped it up a little bit by just shading and adding some of those leaves and doing some more softening in the shadows. So you can see how that's gradually coming a little bit more to life. But I still need to add more tone to these top leaves in here because they're not reading as leaves yet. They're not very exciting. So what I'm going to do is to do the same scribble technique but using a piece of soft willow charcoal. I use the photo as a little bit of reference, then I'll start to scribble in some tone in the general vicinity of where I need it to be a little bit darker. When I have some tone on the board, I'm going to wrap my finger with the chamois cloth and do a little bit of that stippling, which will soften the tone really gently. Remember, I used willow charcoal, so that's going to blend very, very easily. And then to make those lines more distinct, I can go back, strengthen some here and there with a piece of graphite or charcoal pencil and then blend it smooth with a stomp or tortillon. So it's the same process, but now I'm doing it a second time with a layer of the willow charcoal down first, which will make it a little bit darker in here so that the highlight back here will come through even more clearly. I'm going to do the same thing in other places. So I'm going to smooth down the background here, just like so. After the tones are correct, then I can go in with my sharp graphite soft pencil, this is a 9B, and add a few strands of grass in the foreground around the trees, but I'm concentrating that on the foreground where it should be visible. If you do things like that in the background, then you're bringing the viewer too close to these things and you break down your realism. So it's kind of a catch-22. By trying to add realism in the wrong place, you ruin your realism. Just add a little bit of shading to some of the areas that I want to be dulled down. So even though I started with a gray paper, the paper itself is now reading as a bright white because compared to the other tones on the paper, it's the lightest. So the thing to do at this point is to take a step back and make sure that those contrasts are falling where they're supposed to, and that you don't have any bright white paper showing up where you shouldn't. Looks as though I might need to clean up this shape on the road. And there you go. Now the eye is drawn first to the two areas of strong contrast, here and here, but this line of contrast brings the eye up here. I want to see what this detail is up in the trees, and then the interesting shadow shape on the road brings the eye here. And so the eye really does go boom, 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 and it circles all the way around. And since we have successful composition and the drawing tells a definite story and sets a definite mood, I really feel confident that we can end it here for today. So what I want you to do is go to your studio, and if you're used to working on drawing paper, switch it up for a turn and try your hand at working on pastel paper or charcoal paper. You might find that, especially if you're in a slump artistically, just a simple change in your drawing material can make all the difference in the world. So that concludes this month's drawing tutorial, and I thank you so much for watching.